Hello, welcome to Woodburn Rising. Today I'm with Kathleen Fullton. Welcome.
Hi.
Kathleen is at Mclaren, the young person's institution that's situated just on the edge of Woodburn in Hubbard, correct?
The logistics, I don't know. I don't know
So
that it's in Hubbard. So
Kathleen is basically somebody who introduces, how shall I put it, creative, useful things.
creative outlets, life skills, pro-social engagement, and building community connections.
And how do you go about doing that, Kathleen?
Well, the main focus of the nonprofit and the Hope Partnership, which is what I coordinate, is bringing in volunteers to Mclaren to deliver workshops in the arts, life skills, and we do fitness and other things like that. So we do playwriting, and we have a playwright who leads that group. We'll do theater, and we'll have professional actors, professional director lead that group, so these people become volunteers. The idea is you are introducing life skills training through with job connections, job skills training, but also connecting them to a community component, so when they return to their communities, they will have a reference, someplace to go, something to do, to live successful lives after their transition from Mclaren.
So tell us a little bit about the story of Mclaren itself. When did it begin? How was it first initiated? And how has it developed over the years?
So Mclaren itself has a rather long history, and I'm not even totally competent in all of the aspects, but it was a school for boys. In 1921 is the original building, and it was started by a pastor, a Reverend Mclaren, so that's where it got its name. Over the years, I believe it belonged to the Department of Health and Human Services, and the real change that I am more involved with came at the passage of Measure 11, which most people remember is the mandatory minimum law in Oregon. And at the time, there was a juvenile commission, and I think they realized that juveniles were now going to be adjudicated as adults, and what they didn't want to do was put them into the adult population. They wanted to have a separate facility or separate agency to oversee their incarceration. So they started the Oregon Youth Authority. Now, Oregon Youth Authority also does commitments who youth who are not adjudicated, but are in the system for a variety of things. And
so in other words,
they're not sentenced. They're not adjudicated.
So someone might not have a criminal record,
correct.
Yet because of their behavior or lack of it in high school, or even earlier, or younger than that, they could find themselves diverted into the system.
Into the Oregon Youth Authority system. So our biggest group, though, is the Measure 11 youth, who started becoming, they commit their crime at 17, and they're sentenced before they're age 20. They are eligible to be housed at the Oregon Youth Authority versus going up to an adult facility. And
there is a cutoff age for this, yes?
Well, as long as they've committed their crime before they're 18.
And how long, because I understand they leave when they're 25.
So that's right. So we only keep them till they're 25.
Okay.
Now that's true for Oregon Youth Authority commitments as well. Many youth, however, have much longer sentences or more years to serve. So at age 25, they age out, and then they'll go to an adult facility to finish their sentence.
Very good. Now, Measure 11, is there a minimum sentence for that?
Well, they're mandatory minimums. So in other words, there's probably a whole other show to talk about Measure 11.
Probably.
But yeah, it's the judge loses his or her discretion in sentencing, and the district attorney charges, and then depending on the crime, I think there's 22 crimes now that qualify as Measure 11. It's a mandatory minimum sentence, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years. So we have some youth there who have very long sentences. They come in at age 17. Perhaps they have a 7-year sentence, so we'll have them the whole
But what's the earliest
time.
stage that these guys have come in at?
Well, you can come into Oregon Youth Authority. I believe you can't come into the system until age 13, but often you have youth who have committed crimes at 15, and so then they could be in our facility, but they're more likely to be in Hillcrest, which is a much younger population.
Okay. So Wow, that's kind of mind-boggling to think that somebody could theoretically come in at 13 and be there for as long as they've been alive until they transfer someone else.
And we have had youth who've come in at a very young age, and they're Oregon Youth Authority commitments, so they can keep them till they're 25, so they would stay there for 10 years.
Now, just to let people out there know, I signed up for the volunteer process recently, and it's quite a rewarding and exciting thing to do, but there is a kind of process of, well, you have to get fingerprinted, you have to have a background check, and I guess you also talk to the person to see that you feel comfortable with what they're doing. So tell us a little bit about how many volunteers that you're working with Janus, the program that you're working with.
So clarification, Janus Youth Programs is a very big nonprofit in Portland, and their services run the gamut from runaway and homeless youth to even sex trafficked youth. I'm just one very small program under that Janus umbrella. So I serve the population at Mclaren, which is the origin of Hope Partnership, and I also serve three residential properties for the Janus Youth Program in Portland. Similar age group, they are just in transition, in a housing situation, trying to learn their skills, get their jobs, so that then they can move on to the next chapter in their life. So overall, Oregon Youth Authority, I believe, has, I think at Mclaren we may have over 200 volunteers. Now obviously I don't have all of those volunteers. I have a cadre of at least 20 volunteers, and at any given time I'll have 10 coming in doing regular workshops over the course of a week.
When I was there, I met one gentleman who was somebody who works at a sweat lodge.
Yes.
So this is probably quite a gamut of possibilities. Tell us a little bit about those.
Interestingly, sweat lodge, again, Oregon is rather innovative in the area of their juvenile corrections. We're also, I believe, the only state in the nation that has an Office of Minority Services. Similarly, years ago, they realized that our minority youth with a disproportionate contact were getting into the system. And the research is out there that if you can provide relevant cultural education and experiences, then that really helps in their development, and to be able to see themselves in a better fashion, helps with self-esteem, self-efficacy, and turns them away from the stereotypes of their culture that may have been getting into trouble. So at Mclaren, we have a Native American coordinator who runs a sweat lodge. Now the sweat lodge, however, is open to everybody. He takes all youth, and it's just a great experience, and volunteers can do sweats as well if they like. We have a Hispanic coordinator, African American coordinator, and actually we will offer any cultural group that youth request. They requested a Celtic group, so I run that for them, and we've had yes,
that's fun.
So we've had organizations from the outside come in and do Celtic events with us, teach us Celtic dance and Celtic music.
Bloodline, so
I think you do, yes.
So what kind of things do you do for the Celtic?
Well, for the Celtic
rhythm and vibe? Or
in Salem is a great organization called Cayley of the Valley Society, and they've come and done dance with us. They've done a big event where they call the dances. They have their members come. They've had the live musicians come in. One of their members is a regular volunteer with us and has done penny whistle and the Irish drum with us. This past summer, the Portland Highland Games, another great welcoming organization, brought athletes in to do a little mini Highland Games and actually train some of our youth in the various activities to participate.
Wow.
But here's the community connection. This is the key. So, for example, Portland Highland Games, the gal who runs it for the Oregon Washington came in, met our youth, talked to them, and she said, you know, when the youth get out, this is a great thing for them to do. Contact us, we'll put them in touch with an athlete. If this is something they'd like to do, they can train together. So, you know, you're providing that pro-social activity.
So you're kind of handing off.
Right.
Because I know that one of the things that was part of my training was that you have to be very careful of boundaries.
Right.
And so you try, when a young person that you've mentored leaves, they actually do not kind of keep a relationship up unless it's with a church group or...
It's actually changing.
It's changing somewhat?
Yes, and I think because Oregon Youth Authority is realizing that transition and re-entry into community is so important, but it is very difficult to do without having solid mentors and volunteers who will catch the youth when they come out.
And advise them.
Right, so often that
Okay.
relationship has started when they're in the facility, and previously, yes, when you leave, the idea is that relationship has to end.
Okay.
So we're looking at other organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters who have
Yeah.
you know, mentor volunteer cadres, and how do we build new policy around that? How do we help people still maintain boundaries, but still be able to help that youth grow as they get out of the facility, and
Yeah.
introduce them to these activities that we've spent so much time getting them to know and learn and understand and love while they're
A few
in the
years
facility.
back, I made friends with a group of people who worked with a Portland organization called Dinner and a Movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they worked with street kids.
Mhm.
And one of the things they encountered was a huge number of people sexually abused in their own family and
Mhm.
by caregivers. So they found that what was necessary was one of my friends was a police officer who was in that group, but they reparent these street kids.
Mhm.
So in other words, they've lost their parents because those parents kind of washed themselves out of the equation.
Right.
But they came in and started laying down
Right.
these kind of things. So this is what you're talking about.
Right, and we could have
somewhat.
that same circumstance. Many
Yeah.
youth, because of their family situations or their parents or caregivers, they can't go home. They can't go to that home.
Yeah.
So they go to the community, or they're part of the reason that they got into the predicament they were in is their family might be not that they don't love them. They love them very much, and they want very much to help them, but they are not capable themselves of helping that young man.
It triggers
right.
old
So
bad
there's-
behaviors.
or helping
Yeah.
them with jobs and supporting an artistic pursuit
Right.
as a leisure activity. So they often need somebody that is familiar and pro-social, but at least for a short amount of time still has contact who can help them get them in the right direction.
So this would be something that the seniors, particularly in Woodburn, could take an interest in.
An interest, yeah. And so we do have quite a few volunteers in Woodburn. They're mostly the faith-based. We have quite a few
Yeah.
Catholic volunteers who come in. So you could volunteer in a number of ways. You could come into the facility
Right.
and provide something, and anything under the sun that you can think of that you would do with your life, whether it's a trade or a leisure activity or just something that you would expose a young person to. You can come do that. You can just come in and mentor. Just talk about life, just build relationships. Or you could be a person who maybe doesn't come into the facility, but is ready, willing to catch some youth when they come out, be their contact when they come out,
Yeah.
to get them to these agencies or help them fill out paperwork.
There's quite a maze of paperwork, isn't there? That must be for a child who's not had a comprehensive education. This must be a scary thing to encounter the rigors of paperwork in the system.
Well, also, not only that, think of for some of our youth, if you're there for 7, 8 years, how much things change. So even looking at the technology that has changed
Yeah.
in the past 7 years, or how we've moved from paper pencil banking to online banking, where they don't even they don't even want you.
I know.
All you only can do online banking, and the digital literacy that's necessary
Yeah.
to remain safe and
Now,
stay
is
out of
that
trouble.
something that they're going to be lacking because do they get disconnected from
Yeah,
the
they're
internet when
Right,
they're
they're
in there?
very much disconnected from the internet. I mean, if you're in college, which we have the college lab,
Yeah.
obviously you have some access to the internet as needed for your college classes, but they're very much disconnected from technology
Wow.
while they're there. So no cell phones,
No cell phone.
I mean, obviously you see they have television, so you see advertisements on television and
Yeah.
music, but to really understand the intricacies of how do these systems work, how do you keep yourself safe, how do you keep your email from just absorbing tons of junk mail, how to understand how your information
Yeah.
is bought and sold, can you give it out,
So that's
social
not
media.
known. Yeah.
Now, if you look at, when we address this in our job connections, if you look at how much hiring is done through social media, almost 85% of organizations report hiring through social media,
Yeah.
yet our youth have no
Yeah.
visibility or on social media,
Yeah,
much less how to use it.
LinkedIn is just amazing
Yeah,
for people.
right. And how do you build an online presence? We're helping them with portfolios, which then maybe would graduate to online portfolios. How
That's
do you
good.
how do you capture your life
Yeah.
and everything you've accomplished, and then be really well skilled to do interviews?
So does Janice within the system kind of act as a conduit for new ideas, ways of building portfolios. So in other words, you can build a resume. You have either school or jobs, I understand, at Mclaren.
Right. So the program Hope Partnership that I coordinate at Mclaren, that is basically my charge. So we have Goodwill Job Connections that comes in and works with the youth. We are now getting youth all lined up with how to build their portfolios. So how to make the best use of their time while they're there, how to quantify the jobs that they do have, and there's a myriad of jobs that they can have, from food service to laundry to maintenance to the farm to groundskeeping, everything that they do there. And then also working on their job search skills and their interview skills. We have a Toastmasters group at Mclaren.
Excellent.
And that would be another opportunity where you didn't have to be a volunteer, but if you would love to just come to a Toastmasters group and mentor or give a speech, so
that would be wonderful.
That kind of thing. You could come just once a year and do presentations. As a matter of fact, as I was sitting here with all of your guests, I thought it would be great to have a career fair where people from the community could come in and just showcase jobs that would be available. We have to remember, to young men who basically have an adult felony on their record.
Right, and I do know that there are some companies who are founded by ex-felons.
Yes.
And they seem to be very helpful to get young people back on the streets again. And of course, the well-known Oregon example of Dave's Bread, who hires former addicts and offenders. So that seems to be a growing community. Well, so a job fair for that would be just fabulous.
It would be, and I think just to also expose the youth to how many different things there are available to do. They are in a bit of a bubble. The consideration is, and this is like I just meet them where they are. But I do know they're going to be young men who committed a crime as a juvenile, but they will have an adult felony on their record, which they have to disclose.
Yeah, is that forever, or can they expunge it after 8 years?
There's different, depending on the cases of their case or their judgment. But the important thing is how do they navigate that? And so Goodwill is very good at that with barriers to employment. So it's really getting past that first hump of, I just won't hire felons. I'm not going to hire a felon and say, well, I'd like you to look at this kid who, he's not maybe the felon you're thinking of. Obviously, adult felons leaving the, adult system have that exact same problem. So I'm just trying to really break down some of the stereotypes and stigma that comes from committing a crime when you're very young and then having these very
Right, and of course these
penalties.
days, if you do any kind of job, I'm a computer guy in my core skill sets, but you have to have your drug test, you have your background checked, and everything gets checked.
Same thing for housing.
Same
it's
thing
very
for
difficult
housing.
to get housing.
So all of these things just add up as one more barrier, that the only way around it is to skirt the law, which is of course not what we want.
Absolutely no. So we're trying to build sort of a candidate and then transmit to employers and housing groups or landlords that look at this candidate that has built over time, what he's accomplished, look at his skill set. So we try and do lots of mock interviews, bring in people to conduct interviews so that they can just be really comfortable and be the best candidate that they're going to be. Competition is very stiff, so they really have to shine in the areas that will promote their capabilities, not the mistake they made.
Now I know when I was an executive in a Portland company, we actually discussed with the Oregon prison system. I can't remember the official name, but we were looking at maybe hiring some of we were in quality assurance in IT. We were looking at actually hiring some of those guys in prison to do the work, and that was possible. So how do you interface with companies that want to come in and say, can I hire, a bunch of young, I guess they're all young men, right? They're not
they are young
men,
women
there. But how could we develop a business model where we can use those guys, and when they get out, they can continue?
Well, that wouldn't necessarily be with me. That would be with the Oregon Youth Authority or the Department of Corrections.
Okay.
And I believe the Department of Corrections is doing that.
Okay.
my main concern is, getting with these hiring managers and,
Right.
look at even small companies, because sometimes these are corporate decisions. Even though the local manager would hire you corporately, they can't.
Right.
So I feel like if I can get, with hiring managers and just really build a relationship,
Yeah.
so that way then say, come look at our youth that we have for you to hire.
Now, one of the things that I'm intrigued about is, and I know that our Senate President is intrigued about Peter Courtney. He's very involved with mental health issues. We have a lot of young people in Oregon who are disadvantaged in that way. We have people who are bipolar, people who are schizophrenic. We have people who are depressed. So how do those guys get assisted and identified in McLaren? Maybe that's not a question you particularly would know about.
That's not my area. There is a very, very strong component to the Oregon Youth Authority that does oversee mental health and the mental health youth. Like I said, we have qualified mental health professionals, on site all the time, and those youth are being served. Some of these groups are designed for them to also help build their skill sets, and as well as at the same time they're having their mental health issues addressed. So it is definitely something that we know about, we work to address, and at the same time still give them as many skills as we can through the whole partnership groups that they would be eligible to go to.
So tell me a little bit about the fun stuff, the highlights of your time there. What are the most exciting things that you think you've seen and that you've helped pull off?
Well, I enjoy our events immensely because the youth enjoy them so much. Because family come to the events, and you get feedback like, especially after dancing, where you get every nationality up dancing. And when you said that I had so much fun, it felt like I was free. So you have these little moments in time that you're giving them. Our playwright Francesca, she does a wonderful job just grabbing these plays out of these guys, getting them to write the most fantastic things, and at the end, she brings in professional actors to read the play, and that's where the real magic happens.
Wow.
And just watching the young men grow from, being so down on themselves after being told their whole life that they'll never amount to anything, or you're just going to be, XYZ like whoever, and to see them just build their skill set, build their confidence, become amazing writers, then become mentors to other young men who are trying to write, and just sort of watch that evolution happen, as well as keep them normalize their experience a little bit. We talk about it being institutionalized, which is what they're really trying to avoid, because they have to go back to society and function well. So we're trying to bring a little bit of that community to them. It's just really the relationships you can build and watching them grow as young men. Explore, they're empowered. They bring as many ideas to the table. As a matter of fact, the whole partnership was founded by youth in the facility, who saw their idle time, like, what can we?
So the impulse to get you guys in came out of
yes, it did came out of a youth organization that started. It's called the University of Hope Project.
Wow.
But they're there for a long time, and then they complete treatment, and then all they have to do is work. So they said, well, can we do music? Can we do writing groups? And so it evolved from there. One
of the things I was really struck by when the thing that's fascinating is that it's not like a prison in that people go back to their cell block. They actually have these little buildings called cottages. And you have tribes of young people. And when I heard the language, I went into one of these cottages and talked with the young people. Everything they said was so reminiscent of an English boarding school. It is. You've taken a model of an English boarding school designed to train prime ministers. So well, that's why.
Probably where it came from.
So it's obviously got a rich heritage and a subtext of the ruling class of England. So this is pretty. I wouldn't say it's fun.
I'm sure that a lot of people would say, well, we're not.
Yeah.
I don't want them in a boarding school. I want them in a prison. But
yeah,
that
the
is
fact
not where young people belong.
It shapes their character. Yeah. It builds their relationships. It builds teamwork.
Right.
And I saw a pretty well-behaved group of young men. I don't know whether I was taken to the best cottage, but I doubt it. I imagine.
In my experience, they're
They're
pretty well
pretty good.
behaved. I mean, they have their moments
Yeah.
and they have their troubles, but never
Yeah.
had any problems in groove. I have had every volunteer who's come there at some point said, wow, I didn't know it was like this.
Yeah.
Because the idea is you're going to go in and it's going to be a cell block and it's going to
Yeah.
be just, you know, the old term was gladiator school, where it's just
Yeah.
everybody fighting and scrapping for their little bit of
Life.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Oregon Youth Authority has really built a system towards transformation and reformation,
And,
and really supports.
And from what
young
I
men.
understand, the resultant recidivism rate is really low.
Yeah, Oregon has a low recidivism rate. I couldn't quote you the number compared to other states, but recidivism is hard to judge because
Yeah.
every state is different with what they do with their juveniles. So, you know, it's hard to compare. But within the state of Oregon,
Yeah.
juvenile offenders have a low recidivism rate.
So the young people who come in from not the court system, but who come because they, you know, threw too many paper darts at the teacher, or and then suddenly, to their horror, discovered consequences. Do they stay there for a long time, or do they shape up pretty quickly
That's their
before
treatment
they
team. Well,
Yeah.
it depends. It all depends on the youth. It depends on what deficits they came in with.
Yeah.
You know, how much has to be made up. You know, what their team, their treatment team,
Yeah.
you know, decides what's the best setting for them. That's another thing Oregon Youth Authority is looking at, and this is the whole governor's, you know, push to really evaluate youth to see do
Yeah.
they need to be in a close custody situation or is a community setting better.
Yeah.
So.
And I felt
know, all
very
of this-
safe with these
yeah.
guys. I thought if I fell on the floor and knocked my head or something, these guys would have all rushed to help you.
Well, we actually had an incident
Yeah.
last summer where graveyard staff, and you know, and you saw in the cottage they locked the youth into the dorm.
Yeah.
He had a seizure, and youth saw him out there, and they managed to get the phone and call security. So they easily could have just all gone back to sleep or something, I guess. But you know, they all did
behaved
the right
incredibly
thing.
responsibly.
Yeah, exactly. And
Well, I was thoroughly impressed, and I'm looking forward to my time as a volunteer there. So I hope in the future, Kathleen,
I'm
we
very much
have
looking forward to having you
many
there.
more conversations. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much
much,
for
Colin.
coming here. And thank you for watching.